The blade lay buried beneath 17 meters of volcanic rock, wrapped in silence so absolute it could suffocate stars. For 342 years, it had waited not with patience, because patience implies expectation, and the sword had long ago abandoned such foolish notions. It simply existed, humming with a frequency that made nearby crystals shatter and small mammals avoid the area entirely. The Krell archives classified it as artifact designation Theta 9, though the scholars who'd catalogued it were careful to note their instruments malfunctioned within a 5-meter radius. Sensible people, those Krell. They understood when something should be left alone. Naturally, a human found it. His name was Tobias Chen-Okafor, and he was by all reasonable standards an idiot. Not the drooling, can't tie their own shoes variety of idiot. No, Tobias possessed 3 advanced degrees in xenoarchaeology, spoke 7 languages fluently, and could identify pre-convergence pottery shards by texture alone. He was the dangerous kind of idiot. Brilliant, curious, and utterly convinced that his intelligence would protect him from consequences. It would not. Kyra, you're seeing this, right? Tobias's voice crackled through the comlink, breathing hard as his excavation drone pulverized another layer of basalt. The resonance signature is off the charts. This isn't just old. This is first-wave colonation, old maybe older, in orbit aboard the research vessel Inquisitive Mistake. Yes, humans name their ships like they're asking for trouble. Kara Svensson Park sighed the sigh of someone who'd made a terrible career choice. Toby, your contract specifically states you're supposed to be surveying mineral deposits, not digging up potentially hazardous artifacts. Hazardous is such a negative word. I prefer historically significant. The last historically significant thing you found tried to eat you. That was different. That was a misunderstanding between species. This is clearly a weapon, and weapons don't eat people, they just murder them in more straightforward ways. Kyra pinched the bridge of her nose, which was utterly pointless since Tobias couldn't see her, but the gesture helped. Your ability to find the worst possible argument for your actions is genuinely impressive. The drone broke through, and Tobias's sharp intake of breath cut through the comm static. Oh, you beautiful, terrible thing. The sword was, there's no other word for it, absurd. It measured 2.5 meters from pommel to tip, crafted from a metal that seemed to absorb light while simultaneously glowing with a dull crimson pulse. The blade itself was inscribed with symbols that hurt to look at directly, not because they were bright but because they suggested geometries that shouldn't exist in 3-dimensional space. Tobias reached for it. Don't you dare, Kyra said. He touched it anyway, because of course he did. The sword screamed. Not metaphorically, the blade released a sound that shattered Tobias's recording equipment, collapsed 3 nearby tunnel supports, and caused every Krell within 100 kilometers to simultaneously drop whatever they were holding and look in the same direction. The scream contained harmonics that tasted like copper and smelled like ozone and somehow conveyed a very clear message. Finally, someone stupid enough to pick me up. Tobias grabbed the hilt properly, and the world inverted. Light became darkness, up became sideways. Tobias's doctorate suddenly felt very small and useless. Information poured into his mind, not gently, not like learning, but like someone had opened his skull and dumped an encyclopedia directly onto his brain. He saw the sword's history in flashes, a forge that existed before stars were properly invented, a smith whose species had 17 genders and considered war an art form, a final battle that had ended 3 civilizations and birthed 2 new ones. And then, worst of all, he understood what the sword wanted. Oh no, Tobias whispered. Oh no, no, no. What's happening? Kyra's voice seemed to come from very far away. Your vitals just spiked across the board. Toby, talk to me. It thinks I'm its new wielder, he said, and started laughing. Because what else could you do? 300 years it's been waiting for someone to claim it, and it picked the xenoarchaeologist who once got his hand stuck in a Ferocian honor vase. The sword pulsed with what might have been amusement. Put it down, Kyra said, her voice taking on the flat tone that meant she was already calicating rescue mission parameters. Whatever it is, it's not worth. The cave ceiling exploded. Not collapsed, exploded, because 5 Krell wardens descended through the opening in full combat exoskeletons, their plasma rifles already charged and targeting. Krell didn't do subtle when they decided something needed immediate attention. They brought overwhelming force and sorted out the details afterward. The lead warden, a scarred veteran whose nameplate read something unpronounceable that translated roughly to, "has seen too much," leveled his rifle at Tobias. His mandibles clicked in what might have been surprise or might have been the Krell equivalent of swearing. "Human has seen too much," said his translator, rendering the word with appropriate disgust. "You have activated a Class 7 existential threat. Under galactic preservation protocols, I am authorized to neutralize both you and the artifact." Wait, Tobias held up one hand, the other still gripping the sword because it wouldn't let go. He'd tried. "I'm an accredited researcher. I have permits. Lots of permits. I could show you my permits." "Your permits," the warden said slowly, "do not cover awakening weapons that ended the first expansion." "To be fair," Tobias said, and even he knew this was a terrible argument, "your archives didn't mention it was that sword. You just had it labeled as Theta 9. Because has seen too much's voice rose to what was probably a Krell shout, which sounded like gravel in a blender. "We were hoping everyone would forget it existed." The sword pulsed again, and Tobias suddenly knew with the certainty of direct neural download exactly what it wanted him to do. The knowledge came with 1,000 variations, each more elaborate than the last. All of them designed for maximum efficiency and minimum mercy. "I really don't want to do what it's suggesting," Tobias. "Then don't," Kyra said through the comm. "It's very insistent." 4 more wardens dropped through the ceiling, these ones carrying what looked like specialized containment equipment. Krell didn't believe in half measures. If they were bringing containment gear, it meant they'd upgraded Tobias from immediate execution to study, then execute. "The sword or your life," has seen too much said. "Choose now, human." Tobias looked at the blade, which hummed with eagerness. He thought about his 3 degrees, his careful career, his reputation as someone who took calculated risks. He thought about how his mother had warned him against xenoarchaeology, suggesting something sensible like interstellar banking instead. Then he thought about what the sword was showing him, a path forward where he didn't die in this cave, where the Krell didn't vaporize him, where he actually survived to regret this decision properly. "I'm going to do something really stupid," he said. "What else is new?" Kyra muttered. Tobias moved. The sword guided his body with the casual precision of a weapon that had spent centuries planning this exact moment. He didn't fight 9 trained Krell wardens. The sword fought them, using Tobias as a very surprised puppet. The blade sang through the air, not cutting because it didn't need to. Its mere presence disrupted the molecular bonds in the exoskeleton's armor plating. 3 wardens fell in the first 2 seconds, their suits sparking and collapsing into expensive scrap. Has seen too much managed to fire once. The plasma bolt passed through space. Tobias had occupied a microsecond earlier. Guided by the sword's predictive algorithms, the remaining wardens scrambled backward, their training overridden by the very sensible instinct to not engage something that moved like liquid death. "Cease," has seen too much commanded, though whether he meant Tobias or his own troops wasn't clear. "Cease, or we level this entire grid section." Tobias stopped, not because of the threat, but because the sword stopped, apparently satisfied with its demonstration. He stood there, panting, looking at 9 of the galaxy's most elite soldiers backing away from one human holding an ancient weapon. "This is bad," Tobias said between breaths. "This is very bad. You just fought 9 Krell wardens." Kyra's voice was distant, shocked. "You survive. That's impossible." "The sword did it," Tobias said. "I was just the idiot holding on." Has seen too much's mandibles worked silently, calculating. Finally, he lowered his weapons slightly. "The blade has chosen, by the old compact. We cannot interfere with a proper claiming, but human." His eyes fixed on Tobias with something that looked like pity. "That sword destroyed its last 3 wielders. Not enemies, not in battle. Its own wielders because they disappointed it." "That's just fantastic," Tobias said weakly. "Really great information to have now." The sword pulsed with what definitely felt like amusement. You cannot keep it on Krell Station, the warden continued. The council will convene, and they will vote to eliminate you rather than risk what that weapon represents. You have, perhaps, 6 hours before that decision becomes official. 6 hours to what? Hide? Run? Find a really good lawyer? 6 hours to leave our territory and become someone else's problem. Has seen too much gestured to his squad, and they began retreating carefully, never taking their eyes off Tobias. The sword has slept for centuries, human. It woke for you. That means something, though I cannot imagine what. Flee far, die quick, or prove worthy. Those are your options. The wardens evacuated through the ceiling breach, their jets screaming as they achieved orbit in seconds. Tobias stood alone in the ruined cave, holding a weapon that hummed contentedly against his palm, and contemplated every life choice that had led to this moment. Kyra, I'm here. I'm calculating escape vectors. We've got maybe 4 hours before the Krell Council calls, accounting for their legendary bureaucratic efficiency. Where do we go? Anywhere but here. Preferably somewhere without a functional government or weapon detectors. She paused. Toby, that sword just made you the most dangerous or most doomed person in this sector. Maybe both. Tobias looked at the blade, which showed him flashes of possibilities. Battles yet to fight, enemies yet to make. Glory or death, or quite possibly both simultaneously. The sword didn't care which, it just wanted to be used. I'm definitely the idiot here, Tobias said. The sword pulsed with absolute agreement. 4 hours turned into 3 when the Krell Council decided bureaucratic efficiency was less important than eliminating existential threats. Tobias learned this when the inquisitive mistakes proximity alarms started screaming, and Kyra's calm voice announced, "We have 17 warships forming a blockade. Make that 18. 19. They're really committing to this. Can we jump?" Tobias strapped himself into the co-pilot's seat. The sword maglocked the bulkhead beside him. It vibrated unhappily at being separated, even by 2 meters, not for another 40 minutes. The stellar interference in this system requires precise calculations unless you want to end up scattered across 3 parsecs. Kyra's fingers danced across her console, pulling up tactical displays that looked increasingly dire. They're hailing us. Should I answer? Will it buy time? Maybe 30 seconds before they decide talking is less satisfying than shooting. Take it. The view screen flickered and Has Seen Too Much's face filled the display, looking even more haggard than before. Behind him, Tobias could see what looked like the entire Krell High Command, their mandibles clicking in agitated patterns. Human Tobias Chen-Okafor, the warden said formally. The council has voted. 7-4 with 2 abstentions. You and the artifact must be neutralized for the security of the sector, even though the old compact says you can't interfere with a proper claiming. Tobias asked. The old compact was written when we believed the universe made sense. Has Seen Too Much leaned closer to his camera. We were wrong. The universe is chaos held together by temporary truces, and that sword in your possession represents the end of several truces simultaneously. What if I promise to be really careful with it? The warden's mandibles twitched in what might have been a laugh or might have been a threat display. Your species once sent a probe into a black hole to see what would happen. You discovered coffee by eating suspicious berries. You domesticated wolves and called it friendship. Humans and careful do not belong in the same sentence. Fair point, Tobias conceded. You have 1 minute to surrender the blade, then we open fire. I am genuinely sorry, human. Under different circumstances, your reckless stupidity might have been entertaining to observe from a safe distance. The transmission cut. Well, Kyra said, her voice tight. That was almost respectful. For a death sentence. Tobias looked at the sword, which pulsed eagerly, showing him 17 ways to fight their way through a Krell blockade. Each scenario ended with significant collateral damage and a very small probability of survival. There's another option, he said slowly. I'm listening, but I'm also plotting a suicide run, so make it quick. The sword knows things. It's been showing me. I don't know tactical data, historical battles, but just now it showed me something else. A route. Not through the blockade. Around it. There is no around. We're surrounded in three-dimensional space, and they'll track us if we go sublight. Not three-dimensional space. Tobias unbuckled, moving to the sword. The moment he touched it, information flooded his mind, coordinates that tasted like mathematics and smelled like burnt ozone. There's a spatial fold. Right there. 17,000 kilometers spinward. The Krell don't know about it because it's only been there for 6 months, and their last survey was a year ago. Kyra's fingers flew across her console. I'm not seeing anything on sensors.
You wouldn't.
It's small, unstable, and according to this thing's extremely concerning knowledge base, it leads to a dead system 15 light-years away. Dead systems don't have destinations worth reaching. No, but they have no traffic, no witnesses, and no Krell. Tobias grinned, feeling slightly unhinged. We jump there, recalculate properly, then pick literally anywhere else in the galaxy to hide. This is insane. 30 seconds, Tobias reminded her. Kyra swore in 3 languages, which Tobias took as agreement. The inquisitive mistakes engine screamed to life, burning hard toward coordinates that made their navigation computer throw error messages. Behind them, the Krell blockade adjusted formation, weapons charging. They're locking on, Kyra reported. 20 seconds to firing solutions. The sword showed Tobias exactly when to tell her to dive, when to roll, when to burn retrograde in a pattern that defied every spaceflight manual ever written. The ship groaned under forces it wasn't designed to handle somewhere in the cargo bay. Expensive equipment shattered. Plasma fire lit up the void behind them, beautiful and deadly. The Krell weren't shooting to disable. They were shooting to obliterate, to ensure nothing remained that could be salvaged or studied. There, Tobias pointed at empty space. Fold entrance in 5 seconds. I still don't see. Kyra stopped as their sensors suddenly registered an anomaly. A tear in reality so subtle it looked like sensor noise. Oh, that's horrifying. That's a natural wormhole, unstable, uncharted, and we're going to fly into it at full burn. Correct. I hate you so much right now. That's fair. The inquisitive mistake hit the fold at a speed that would have horrified any safety inspector. Reality twisted, colors inverted. Gravity suggested 6 different directions simultaneously. Tobias's stomach tried to exit through his ears while his inner ear insisted they were falling upward. The ship's hull shrieked as space-time itself disagreed with their presence. Then they were through, tumbling into a dead system lit by a dying red giant. No planets, no stations, no life, just stellar debris and the slow decay of a sun entering its final centuries. Kyra checked their systems with shaking hands. Hull integrity at 70%. Jump drive needs 2 hours to recharge. Life support is... She paused. Life support is fine, which is honestly surprising given how that felt. Did we lose them? She checked the sensors, then checked again, then ran a full diagnostic because the results seemed wrong. Yes. The fold collapsed behind us. Even if they knew where it led, they can't follow. We're... She laughed, slightly manic. We're alive. Against every reasonable expectation, we're alive. Tobias slumped in his seat, the adrenaline draining away and leaving him hollow. The sword hummed contentedly, apparently satisfied with the chaos it had orchestrated. Now what? Kara asked. We can't go back to Krell space. Your academic credentials are probably revoked. The Galactic Preservation Authority will have flagged you as a Class 7 threat carrier. You're officially the most wanted archaeologist in several sectors. I really didn't think this through, Tobias admitted. You, not think something through? I'm shocked, devastated, completely blindsided by this revelation. Despite everything, Tobias smiled. Then the smile faded as the sword pulsed, drawing his attention to the view screen. Something was moving out there, among the stellar debris. Something big. Kara, tell me we're alone in this system. We are. Sensors show nothing except rocks and radiation. Then what is that? The shape resolved itself slowly. A vessel, if you could call it that. More like a city that had decided to float through space, covered in architecture that predated most current civilizations. It was dormant, cold, emitting no power signature, just drifting through the dead system like a monument to something ancient and forgotten. The sword recognized it. Information poured into Tobias's mind. This was a forged ship, one of 7 constructed by the makers, the species that had crafted the sword itself. They'd been dead for millennia. Their civilization collapsed, their technology scattered across the galaxy as artifacts that occasionally woke up and caused problems. That's where the sword was forged, Tobias whispered. That's its home. Great, wonderful. Can we leave now? But the sword had other ideas. It pulsed insistently, showing Tobias something buried deep within that dead ship. Knowledge, weapons, technologies that would make him either the most powerful human alive or the most dangerous target in the galaxy. It wants me to go inside, he said. Of course it does. Because why would we catch a break? Kyra pulled up scans of the forged ship. It's structurally sound, surprisingly. No atmosphere, no power, but the hull is intact. Whatever the makers built, they built to last. I have to go. No, you really don't. We can jump to some nice, quiet colony world. You can bury that sword in a deep hole, and we can pretend this never happened. The sword showed him what would happen if he tried that. The blade would sing, louder and louder, until its frequency attracted attention from everyone nearby, or it would simply take control, forcing him to retrieve it. The sword had chosen him, and it wasn't accepting returns. It won't let me abandon it, Tobias said. And honestly, after it saved us from the Krell, I'm curious, what else is in there? What else did the makers leave behind? This is exactly the kind of curiosity that gets archaeologists killed in truly memorable ways. Yes, but think of the paper I could write. Primary source investigation of maker-forged ship architecture. It would revolutionize the field. The field that will kill you on sight for carrying a Class 7 threat? Details. Tobias was already suiting up, checking his EVA gear. I'll be quick in and out, just a preliminary survey. Kara made a sound that conveyed deep skepticism and deeper resignation. 2 hours, that's how long until the jump drive recharges. If you're not back by then, I'm leaving without you. No, you won't. No, I won't. But I'll be very angry about it. The shuttle ride to the forged ship was silent except for Tobias's breathing and the sword's continuous hum. Up close, the vessel was even more impressive. Kilometers of hull covered in inscriptions that hurt to read directly, suggesting mathematics that predated conventional physics. He found an airlock, or what his suit's translator insisted was probably an airlock. The sword pulsed, and the door simply opened, recognizing its own presence. Inside, the ship was a cathedral of metal and purpose. Massive chambers stretched in impossible directions, filled with equipment whose purpose Tobias could only guess. Forges, certainly. He could see where metals had been heated and shaped, but also what looked like genetic engineering bays, quantum computation cores, and something that might have been a weapons testing range or might have been modern art. It was genuinely hard to tell. The sword guided him deeper through corridors that seemed to rearrange themselves subtly, until they reached a chamber at the ship's heart. Here, finally, was something Tobias recognized. An armory. Weapons lined the walls. Dozens of them, each unique, each radiating the same wrongness as the sword. Blades that whispered, spears that hummed. A bow that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. All dormant, all waiting. In the center of the chamber sat a pedestal, and on that pedestal rested a book. Not a datapad, not a holographic archive, an actual physical book, bound in materials that looked organic but definitely weren't. The sword practically vibrated with eagerness. Tobias approached the book carefully, his archaeological training warring with his survival instincts. The cover bore a single symbol that his translator couldn't parse, but the sword understood perfectly. Instructions. Of course, Tobias muttered. Ancient civilization builds ultimate weapons, leaves them scattered across the galaxy, and includes an instruction manual. That's almost responsible of them. He opened the book. The text was incomprehensible at first, then suddenly wasn't. The sword was translating, feeding understanding directly into his mind. What he learned made him want to sit down very suddenly except sitting in zero gravity was awkward. The weapons weren't weapons. Not really. They were tests. The makers had understood something about the universe that current civilizations had forgotten. Power without purpose was just destruction waiting happen. So they'd created these artifacts, scattered them deliberately, and waited. Whoever found them, whoever proved worthy to wield them, would be tested not by combat, but by choice. The sword had already begun its test. Every decision Tobias made while carrying it would matter: how he fought, who he protected, what he destroyed. The blade would judge him, adjust to him, and eventually either accept him as worthy or consume him as insufficient. "That's deeply concerning," Tobias said aloud. The sword pulsed with what felt like agreement, but also encouragement. It had chosen him for a reason, and it wanted him to succeed, if only because failure would mean returning to sleep for another few centuries. Tobias closed the book, his mind racing. He could leave it here, abandon the knowledge, flee back to Kyra and jump away. Or he could take it, along with the understanding of what he'd gotten himself into. The choice, ultimately, wasn't difficult. He'd spent his entire career seeking to understand the past. Now the past was offering to teach him directly, even if the lessons might kill him. He tucked the book into his suit's cargo pouch and began the long walk back to the shuttle, the sword summing approvingly. Kyra's voice crackled over the comm. "Please tell me you found something useful and not more apocalyptically dangerous artifacts." "I found an instruction manual for how not to die horribly while wielding ancient weapons of mass destruction." "So you found something both useful and apocalyptically dangerous. That's very on brand for you." Tobias smiled, floating through the forge ship's corridors toward the airlock. Behind him, the armory's other weapons remained dormant, waiting for their own wielders, their own tests, their own stories. The sword had slept for centuries. It had woken for him for reasons he was only beginning to understand. And now, whether he liked it or not, Tobias Chen-Okafor was no longer just an archaeologist. He was a wielder, marked by ancient powers, hunted by modern authorities, and accompanied by a weapon that might kill him if he disappointed it. His mother had been right about the banking job, but as the shuttle docked with the inquisitive mistake and Kyra began plotting jump coordinates to anywhere that might offer temporary safety, Tobias couldn't help feeling a strange sense of rightness. The sword hummed against his side, no longer just a burden but almost a companion, albeit one that expected excellence and offered death as an alternative. "Where to?" Kyra asked. Tobias thought about the book's final passage, the one that had made him laugh despite everything. "The worthy wield wisely, the unworthy wield once. Somewhere quiet," he said finally. "Somewhere I can read this manual thoroughly before the sword decides I'm too stupid to live." "That's the most sensible thing you've said all day. Don't get used to it." The inquisitive mistake jumped, carrying its crew away from the dead system, away from the Krell blockade, toward whatever came next. The sword pulsed one final time, not with threat or demand, but with something that felt almost like anticipation. After 342 years of sleep, it had found a wielder who might just possibly be interesting enough to keep, even if he was an idiot.